Today is March 10th, 2024, and exactly 4 years ago, Warzone launched. To some, this changed the entire trajectory of the franchise for the better. Some would say the worst, but whatever way you look at the introduction, the impact the mode has had on the franchise and the gaming industry as a whole is undeniable. Today, we're taking a look at the complete timeline and evolution of Warzone from day one, in fact, even before, to where we are now, 1,461 days later, spanning 5 titles, 11 maps, depending on if you count some of the map updates and overhauls, hundreds of weapons, millions of matches played in one classic question: where are we dropping? If you enjoy this video, the retrospective look at the journey alongside Warzone, you want to see more of this long-form documentary style of content, do me the biggest favor and drop a like on this video, and of course, make sure you subscribe for more. For now, let's dive into the complete evolution of Warzone. The very first time we saw our first glimpse at what you could call Warzone was all the way back in the summer of 2019, September of 2019 to be more precise. During September, we saw the beta for Modern Warfare 2019, offering a hands-on experience for all players, depending on the platform. During that beta, players were able to play a new mode that looked to capture some of Battlefield's audience, perhaps, a mode called Ground War. Now, Ground War, of course, in concept, wasn't new to Call of Duty. I mean, we've had Ground War in classic games spanning years back at this point, but Ground War at the scale that we saw in Modern Warfare 2019 was new and pushed the boundaries for the franchise. Previously, it was simply 9v9 gameplay, a total of 18 players in a match, but in Modern Warfare 2019, it pushed the envelope a bit to 32v32 combat with vehicles and all, a total of 64 player lobbies, which for Call of Duty was unheard of. In these massive battlegrounds, the maps were much larger and outfitted as a sort of world per se, and in that beta, we saw our first glimpse of what would become Warzone. Karst River Quarry and Tvorsk District were a part of that, where interestingly, Karst River Quarry was actually the first map introduced for Ground War, and was actually not too much of a clue as to when we'd first be introduced to it, because when you look at the other Ground War maps, there was no connecting features in Karst as opposed to the other maps. Like if you looked out of bounds, you wouldn't see any other subsidiary areas of Verdansk just yet. Our next glimpse at the game of what Warzone would become was with the launch of Modern Warfare 2019. It was mentioned pre-release that Infinity Ward had no plans for a battle royale following the success of Blackout and the growth of things like Fortnite at the time, but it was mentioned that they said they had no plans at launch, a key distinction that was the PR jargon leaving the door open the whole time, but Spec Ops became that next look at what Warzone would turn into, even though we perhaps didn't even know it at that point. I've told the story a few times now on the channel, but pre-release of Modern Warfare 2019, myself and a few other creators, and mainly like media press like IGN and other publications, were invited out to Los Angeles to get a hands-on early capture session to get our reviews and stuff in and content ready before launch of Modern Warfare 2019. But during our playtest, I was playing with Exclusive Ace, Ink Slasher, and a PR lead from Activision. I still remember clear as day that at one point during the mission with the airport, I had to parachute back in, and I was flying over this world of Verdansk, and I said, this would make for a perfect battle royale. You have all the mechanics, you have the big map in the world, to which I was quickly met with that dismissive, I have no idea what you're talking about, from PR, but little did I know. Now, fast forward a few months when we get to Season 2 of Modern Warfare 2019. At this point, it's been months of focus of Modern Warfare 2019 content. The new Battle Pass system, the new shop system, the new maps and weaponry that we've seen to date, and the idea of a Battle Royale was kind of partially lost on some people, as if they would introduce it, why wouldn't they have seen any sort of teaser for this just yet? Well, in came Season 2's cutscene from Modern Warfare 2019. Modern Warfare 2019 started to sort of craft a storyline, not only just through campaign, but also extending then into Spec Ops and into the seasonal cutscenes, which in Season 2, we saw a cutscene of Ghost descending upon Verdansk International Airport to see the reports of why operators were turning on each other, to which he says to send fighters that he can trust, and then the camera would then pan out to the world of conflict in a cargo plane with players dropping out of it with gas off in the distance. Now, at that moment, it all kind of became clear and the shadow of doubt was lifted. A battle royale was coming. Fast forward a few more weeks beyond that, and we saw a main menu slice for Modern Warfare 2019, which included a new blade that said classified and scrambled backdrop that left everyone wondering for a little while before a countdown began, and thus Warzone was introduced. On March 10th, 2020, the first free Call of Duty experience on a mainline platform, not like mobile or COD Online, it was the first time ever something free Call of Duty dropped, allowing players all over the world, brand new or veteran, to take part in this new world of Warzone. Verdansk, the world that we had been teased for months up until this point, was now an open area to explore, fight on, and secure victory with your friends. With plenty of new and undiscovered areas, it was an all-out hunt to see who could find the secrets Verdansk held, along with mastering the map to do as well as possible, as early as possible. We recently did a revisiting video talking about how much the game varied at that point compared to where you'd be today, and it's truly incredible how different the game was. Without too much details, because we've already covered it, Warzone's pacing, meta, weapon choice, perk and attachment selections, playstyles were all so incredibly different. In a shorthand story, Warzone was a completely different game, a much slower and methodical game, because everyone didn't really have their bearings about them for a little bit of time. The one that I will always mention because it was one of my favorites was that the thermal sniper was the main meta choice for so many people. Like, you'd probably never see that in today's game. Even on like an April Fool's video of something like, hey, this is the new meta. Warzone Season 2, though, that launch season was a much simpler time. A time of exploring the world with M4A1 no stocks, EBR2 shot builds, the thermal snipers, all searching for Easter eggs to discover, the bunkers, phones, and laptops that seemed to hold some interest, as well as trying to get our first victories in the new experience of Warzone. And what a time it was. Naturally, during Season 2, we weren't really getting any major or crazy updates to the game because, well, it's a brand new experience, a massive drop by any stretch of the imagination, so Season 3 was when we first saw our first set of major changes to the game. The map in Season 3 saw a few small updates and then one larger one. The smaller details were a few air quote goat trails, as they were called, as they allowed for a bit more pathing up certain areas around the map, making for more scalable geo when it came to traversing the world of Verdansk. But then the larger of the changes in the map itself came in the introduction of the bunker systems, a set of bunkers around the world that were locked off, save if you had a key card that allowed you to access them. Just about every, if not every bunker that had an entrance out in the open, they were accessible by these key cards, though bunkers that were like underground were not. And strangely, some of those were never used in the future seasons despite having interactable keypads on them. These bunkers had tons of high-level loot and made for a great way to either start a battle royale game or, if you were playing Plunder, to put yourself up by around $200,000 plus in cash in about a 30-second time frame. However, while all the riches in these bunkers proved to be an instant hit, they were all kind of a sort of decoy for the real ones that players should have paid attention to. Up in the northern portion of the world, above Arklov military base, there was a lone bunker that had a red light above it and a generator sat next to it. A distinctive feature that for many may have just been a fun little art detail, but for anyone willing, it might have been an actual clue. And a clue it was, because this bunker was different than the rest. That bunker you had to go on an Easter egg quest to complete. Now, to spare you the painful retelling of this in excruciating detail, the short story was that the phones around the map that we had seen introduced to Warzone, they finally had a purpose. A few of these were dubbed activation phones, as a few specific ones would start a message, all spoken in Russian, giving out 3 numbers that you had to decipher. Those numbers corresponded to other phones around the map that you were tasked then with finding and interacting with them. If you did them in the wrong order, you'd have to restart the whole process, but if you did it right, you completed the air quote, let's call it circuit. If you didn't know what you were looking for, there wouldn't have really been an immediate reward or anything to let you know, okay, so what's next? But if you did know, you could head over to Bunker 11 and it would have a green light above it rather than a normal red light. From there, you'd go and interact with that keypad and open up this locked-off bunker, to which inside, you'd find a ton of high-level loot, story elements including a nuclear warhead chassis without the payload, and for rewards, an exclusive MP7 blueprint called the Mud Robber. To date, that's still one of my favorite-looking blueprints from Modern Warfare 2019. It was quite the Easter egg hunt, and one of few that I could say that I was actually one of the first in the world to do. I don't know if my crew was the first, but I knew we were close to being it. Something we haven't attempted since, and definitely wouldn't get close to since, which is pretty cool. Beyond that, Season 3 introduced a few things in the gameplay realm, like the armor satchel, which allowed for players to hold up to 8 armor plates instead of the default 5. And what was cool was that initially when these first came out, they were actually bugged where when you picked them up, you got 8 plates, even if you picked it up off a dead player that didn't have any plates at all. They were bugged for quite some time, where like later on down the line into like Vanguard's year of support, we had that corrected version where you could pick them up and then they'd have whatever was left over in that, which I'll be totally honest with you, yeah, in a dev term, it squashed a long-term bug, but I kind of like that one. Anyways, Season 4, the next progression in Warzone, it introduced a few new gameplay features to the game, but ultimately wasn't a huge season by comparison. It was the first season that we didn't really have anything massive to look forward to. We didn't get anything really cool in the way of a new bunker or a new Easter egg item or anything like that, and I remember thinking at the time, it was kind of lame that you didn't have anything follow up such a cool seasonal event, but it did introduce a few things fundamentally that altered the gameplay look that we still have to date. In-game events were first seen in Season 4. Things like fire sale, jailbreak, supply choppers, and contraband contracts were all introduced. Fire sales, of course, discounted everything in the buy stations. Jailbreaks, of course, increased the player counts by offering a mid-game sort of revive just for free, and made for more chaotic mid and end-game scenarios. Supply choppers did damage to you in Plunder, but in Battle Royale, they were kind of just a loud nuisance. And then contraband contracts, those were so cool, and a way to get limited time rare blueprint rewards by completing a contract and going to the sort of exfil location that you'd have that mimicked the Plunder cash drop LZ. What was interesting also was the fact that Season 4 introduced a new new track system in Verdansk, but notably absent was a train of any kind to go on those tracks. So just the tracks were added, a big hint for what was coming in Season 5, but weird no less. Now, while Season 4 wasn't a huge season by any regards in Modern Warfare 2019 for Warzone, Season 5 was kind of that rebound season because we not only had map updates, we had events, and we also had a couple of things in between there. So for map updates, we saw the stadium and train station open up. Previously, the stadium was something that was almost an entirely lost grid sector of Verdansk because it was something that you could not go into, you could not get on top of because there were no zip lines, and it was just something that even sometimes the circle would close in on that. So if you had a helicopter, you were guaranteed a free win because everyone else would die in the zone before it closed in on the center of the stadium. That was now no longer the case, where you had the ability to go into the concourse, the underground parking system, the upper executive level, and even out onto the pitch. And the train station, again, that opened up where you had levels of new loot locations and ways to get in and out of and around the train station. It wasn't something that, again, was kind of just a lost sector of land. Now, the stadium also did introduce another Easter egg here, the first time that we saw one since Season 3. That stadium Easter egg had a few steps to it, but each step along the way gave you some special rewards. You could earn things like Specialist Bonus, an Advanced UAV, and a Durable Gas Mask. Those all brand new here to Modern Warfare 2019 and the Warzone experience with this season. And then if you completed the overall Easter egg of unlocking the Executive Suite, you ended up getting a loadout drop, you ended up getting fireworks that went off in the stadium, and then also a reward of the Enigma CR56 AMAX blueprint. So another cool little Easter egg here that was available for anyone willing to do it. Now, beyond that, we saw some gameplay changes in the way of how Verdansk itself worked. We had that new roaming train system that was in the western portion of Verdansk. Those train tracks that were available in Season 4, there actually was a roaming train now on it that you could end up going on. It had high-level loot, it had some stuff that was worth going for, but it was kind of a high-risk, high-reward type of situation, especially early game. But that was something that was added in. It changed the dynamic of how the rotations and everything could work in Verdansk. But beyond that, we also saw the introduction of the zipline system in Season 5, something that we still see today and see alterations from today to back then where it was improved upon. We saw more of them introduced and everything in between, but this is the first time you had the availability to combat that high elevation camping. Notably, downtown Verdansk was pretty bad with campers on the rooftops and everything like that. Stadium, again, people would camp on the top of that. You then had zip lines to get up there and try and fight and counter, and also for those sort of skyscraper buildings, you didn't just have now a one-way angle of one singular doorway going to the rooftop. You had multiple points of entry, which is definitely nice. Season 5 also introduced us to a couple events. Firstly, the event of the Games of Summer, something that tasked players with getting challenges done and then granting players a reward blueprint after completing all of them. Now, they would progressively, as the time goes by, get more and more involved with Warzone, whereas the Games of Summer wasn't exclusively Warzone, but it was something that was introduced in Season 5 no less. And then finally, to close off the Season 5 festivities here and the big sort of selling point of the season, beyond just the gameplay updates, was the Black Ops Cold War live reveal, the first event of Warzone's kind, a live in-game reveal showcasing the trailer of the upcoming title, something that came along with a few different things you could end up completing in a match of sort of altered plunder. You get rewards and then eventually see the reveal trailer, something that we'd see happen more than once in the next couple of years. Season 6 then, as the final season of Modern Warfare 2019's year of support, we ended up seeing a couple of things. It wasn't necessarily as massive as Season 5 was in terms of the gravity of things and the amount of changes, but we did see changes no less. We saw the subway system introduced, which is a fast travel system around Verdansk that we had seen a couple of different times. We saw it with the Red Door system upcoming in Black Ops Cold War's year of support. We saw it with the minecart system in Caldera, as we'll get to, but it is something we've seen a couple of times in Warzone's history, but it's the first we saw at that point. Whereas a fast travel system that would take you to certain subsets of Verdansk, it was a nice way to clear a lot of distance in a short period of time. Now, additionally, because of this new system, there was also a subway station Easter egg that dealt with matching artwork up in the Capitol building of downtown Verdansk and then overriding the control system for the subway station. Once you ended up doing that Easter egg, you could actually go to the maintenance station, something that was off of the main loop and main accessible areas. You had to complete this Easter egg to go there, and it was only for your squad then at that point that you would get there. But when you made it to the maintenance station, you'd end up getting a ton of loot, some high-level items like advanced UAVs, a Juggernaut, Specialist Bonus. I think Foresight was in there, something that showed you all of the remaining zones zones in the Battle Royale. And then, of course, what Easter egg would it be if you didn't get a blueprint alongside completing that? It came along with the Firebrand Bruin Mark 9. One of my favorite in terms of aesthetic design. I just wish the attachments were a little bit better, but it was a cool blueprint, no less, just for completing that Easter egg. Now, outside of that, Season 6 was relatively quiet, but we did end up getting our first haunting event where the Haunting of Verdansk took place. In that event, you had our first couple looks at crossover items in regards to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Jigsaw bundles within the store with their own designated operator skins here for characters in Modern Warfare 2019. But you also saw the introduction and collaboration of the zombies modes here within Warzone, which were a ton of fun at that point. To date, the Haunting of Verdansk is still the best haunting event we've had for a lot of players, and it was certainly one to remember. Now, that said, after Season 6, well, we moved over into Cold War. We saw the launch of Black Ops Cold War. Multiplayer was a focus for a bit where people were grinding out their weapons, but Cold War introduced the first of its kind here for Warzone, a full integration into the Warzone experience, because unlike Black Ops 4's Blackout, well, Warzone was this through line for all of the upcoming Call of Duty titles, meaning that every single game following would be ported into Modern Warfare 2019 and Warzone, and Black Ops Cold War did just that in Season 1. Now, with such a large-scale integration, of course, it had its own problems. There were tons of weapons that were truly broken, not only from a balancing perspective, but also the mechanics felt a little bit different if you were jumping from Black Ops Cold War's multiplayer to Warzone. Two very different game engines, so it felt tremendously different in regards to playing both of those. But you had a ton of problems in regards to, like, the DMR meta. The M16 and the AUG were insanely crazy. The FFAR was insane. There were a lot of weapons that were just busted, but they were a lot of fun too at some points. Like the FFAR, I think, is still probably one of my favorite weapons to run with a sniper of like the Kar 98K. The Swiss K31 wasn't around just yet, but whew, that was a great combo. Get something for long range with that Kar 98K, hit that headshot, but then you had the mobility and fast fire rate of an assault rifle in that FFAR. Beyond that, we also saw the introduction of Rebirth Island, something that came back from Blackout, where that was Alcatraz Island, but Rebirth now for Warzone. You got to play on that classic map again, and it soon became a hit across the board for Warzone players. That again had an Easter egg, and it was the last one for a long time that we ended up seeing. But this one, you had to end up unlocking one of the control room vaults, where once you did, you ended up getting the Red Room Milano blueprint. Something that, again, I thought was really good, and it was nice. The Milano was pretty meta for a long time during Black Ops Cold War's year of support, so you got some use out of it if you wanted to use that blueprint. Now, that said, Season 1 was also the ending of the Warzone storyline, or canonically the ending of the Warzone storyline, because we saw Captain Price and 141 thwart Zakhaev's plan to enact World War III, setting off the missiles underneath the bunkers and everything like that. Although we do see that he came back in Modern Warfare 3. We didn't know that at the time, but yeah, apparently he survived that fall in that ending cutscene. But canonically, that's where the story left off within Modern Warfare 2019. Season 2 and beyond kind of got a little crazy, and that was something that they seemingly wiped a little bit of that from the history of Warzone. But anyways, to end Season 1 altogether, we saw the last couple of weeks, actually, a ship that was off the coast of Rebirth Island that then came over to the coast of Verdansk. The Vodyanoi left Rebirth and came to that the last couple of days to weeks within Season 1, where you saw it progressively leave Rebirth and come closer to Verdansk, which was pretty cool, but that was something that then led directly to Season 2 of Black Ops Cold War. This, we saw our first changes to the map in a long time, first significant ones in months, where that ship of the Vodyanoi crashed just off the coast beneath the prison. We saw that shipwreck, we saw silos open up around the map where those sort of monuments were beforehand in Verdansk. Those opened up where you could end up getting into there, and there were some special loot locations there, but it also, interestingly, closed off the subway station and stadium, which was strange because, I mean, you saw those introduced and opened up within Season 5 and Season 6, so it wasn't like they were there for that long and playable for that long, but the subway stations were closed up, as was part of that stadium, so certainly interesting, but a choice that was made no less. Now, Season 2 was our first sort of event that spanned the entire season and had some sort of storyline narrative behind it, but it was the Outbreak event that was admittedly pretty terrible to start the season. It really didn't do much of anything in terms of practicality until about the final week of the season, but that's when the zombies outbreak culminated and we needed to nuke Verdansk. A real event in-game, a two-parter here, one from the perspective of trying to survive in Verdansk after the outbreak actually took over and you were trying to survive with the hordes of zombies chasing you down, and another from the perspective of fighting for the nuke and calling it in from Rebirth Island, which, give me nighttime Rebirth more, I think that would be awesome to play on that again. That was a true vibe. But anyways, it coincided with the launch of Season 3, that Part 1 taking part the last day of Season 2, and Part 2 taking place the first day of Season 3, which was actually pretty cool because if you played it from the Rebirth perspective on the launch of Season 3, well, you thought you were probably done just by completing that and seeing a sort of ending cutscene of sorts going into what was Season 3 and the new alteration of Verdansk in Verdansk 84. But instead of just seeing the cutscene and having the ability to queue up, it actually dropped you directly into a game of Verdansk 84. Granted, it was a smaller player count, it was a smaller subset there with it, but you had the entire map to explore and you jumped right from one game into the next. A really cool transition that I don't think anybody really saw coming. But Verdansk 84 introduced a few different changes to the map. Obviously, it was a thematic change. So that was something that was set in 1984 rather than the current present day of 2020 as it was within Modern Warfare 2019's Year of Support. We saw points of interest changed where Dam was replaced by Array. There was a factory added between Superstore, Hangars, and Block. The Duga radar array was added north of TV. Stadium was opened up almost entirely because, well, it was a construction site. It wasn't the stadium anymore because it wasn't completed. And it also, at the beginning, added this red to orangish hue to everything, which was not fun. Did not like that at all. We saw a smaller event of the Hunt for Adler, though it had problems and didn't track, so eventually all players were granted the completion reward for just simply logging in. But the 80s Action Hero event brought along with it a couple of other additional changes. Not only one did it have these classic movie crossovers of Die Hard and Rambo, but it introduced changes to the maps of the survivor camps around the map, the Nakatomi Plaza, which was added, and the Vault Easter egg as a part of that. Funny enough, though, the Nakatomi Plaza tower actually entirely replaced and stayed there for the rest of Verdansk 84. It stayed there and replaced the under construction skyscraper from Tovorsk District that was there at the beginning of Season 3. That was only there. It was like this whole new point of interest that was added that was only live for a couple of weeks, which I always thought funny. But anyways, the Vault Easter egg for Nakatomi Plaza, you had 3 separate possibilities with 3 different unique rewards or outcomes, giving a lot of cash, utility like an advanced UAV, or specialist bonus, which was the coolest part here out of it. It was a way to reliably get specialist bonus for you and your team if you did it, which was insanely good for Warzone Battle Royale. But anyways, Black Ops Cold War's year moved on. We saw Season 4 introduce a bunch of more air quote updates with satellite crash locations. The entire sort of theme was this ground fall event for Black Ops Cold War where Stitch was crashing all these satellites around and they would crash land in Verdansk, where these would be lootable locations where you could capture them like recon style contracts, which they would give you either a HARP or a loadout drop marker for free. Now, the difference between the HARP and the advanced UAV was that advanced UAVs showed ghost and lasted a shorter duration, but the HARPs, they lasted longer and did not show ghosted players. We also saw the new red door feature, which was that fast traveling system, as we mentioned, that would come back a couple of times in Warzone's history. That corresponded to some specific areas, but it wasn't ever explicitly laid out like, hey, this point takes you to this point, like it was with the subway station system back in Modern Warfare 2018. And one final thing that was added with Season 4 of Cold War was custom mod support for Cold War weapons, where you could finally save your blueprints easily. That was something that anytime you wanted to set up a new weapon, or if you wanted to copy a weapon over to a different class, you had to go in and just do it by memory, which sure may have been muscle memory if you use the same weapons over and over again, but just saving custom mods was something that, when you thought about how long we didn't have it, was kind of crazy. Season 5 for Cold War introduced a couple of things. The new mobile broadcast systems, though, those were in the game from the start of Season 5 and were not usable until the mid-season updates. They were kind of worthless through that seasonal launch, but at the mid-season update, it gave cash for those who first activated them. The red doors were updated, where it didn't just drop you in any single room anymore. Instead, it took you to a corridor sort of like limbo period, where you could choose which door you wanted to go through, which was kind of cool. We saw a gulag change. We saw the new perks of Combat, Scout, and Tempered perks being added, our first Warzone-specific perks, which was cool to see in the sense of them adding perks to the game, but those in particular, Combat Scout more specifically, wasn't something too fun to go up against. In Season 5, we also did actually see Zombies camos finally introduced and added to Warzone, 268 days after the announcement of Zombies camos eventually coming to Warzone, but they stated at that point that it wouldn't be coming with the integration, so 268 days since that point. Something that we'd see replicated again in the following year with Vanguard and the Dark Ether camo that came along there as well. But in Season 5, we also did see that Vanguard reveal event to cap off the festivities here with that. The Battle of Verdansk saw us trying to stop an armored train and then trying to take shelter from an aerial bombardment, though you couldn't actually take shelter from it. It was something that you were destined to fail, you could not get away from it, and that would eventually end up showing you the Vanguard reveal trailer. Now, Season 6 of Cold War, the final season of support for Black Ops Cold War, it saw actually a decent bit of changes here at this. The sort of story that followed this, the narrative through line, was that Adler had rigged Verdansk to blow in order to stop Stitch, where as a result, we saw a bunch of map changes with map fissures or cracks throughout Verdansk. Downtown, stadium, near the hospital, hills below Radio Tower, those were all affected, and you'd see it plain as day that the world of Verdansk sort of had this earthquake just split the entire world apart. We also saw 3 bunkers added around the map that were old World War II style bunkers. Now that we knew that Vanguard would be a World War II COD, they were trying to play into what was coming next in the following year of support. Now there was loot in each of them, decent starting locations, but there was no Easter egg for them, unfortunately, despite Amos Hodge from Raven mentioning Easter eggs by name when talking about these things, which is kind of weird. And what I will say whenever we talk about Easter eggs is that it was honestly a bit disappointing that we had a classic subsection of the franchise, Black Ops, that was just the entire basis of it is messing with your mind. Nothing ever really came of any Easter eggs within the Black Ops Cold War year of support for Warzone. Seemed like a missed opportunity to me, but anyways, we saw the OG Gulag return as a final piece to the map change, which is definitely nice. After a handful of different changes to the Gulag throughout, none really scratched the itch or did it quite as well as the original. It returned here within the end of Cold War and the last days of Verdansk, which, speaking of, we saw a couple of events in regards to the Haunting event coming back, though this time playing into ghosts and spirits rather than zombies, as we saw with Modern Warfare 2019's. We saw the Secrets of the Pacific event, Operation Flashback, and the last hours of Verdansk final event, where if you won, you got an exclusive Final Victor calling card, and at the very end, if you stayed, you got a cutscene previewing the next stop of Caldera along the way. Now, that said, Vanguard brought along with it, of course, its own game, and once we shifted to Season 1 and the integration to follow, well, this was the biggest change to Warzone ever. Caldera was a brand new map. We finally got to say goodbye to Verdansk. You could punch your ticket to the Pacific, but it was all new terrain, locale, and a new world to explore. Now, for better or for worse, we got a whole new world. It was something that by the end of Vanguard, people were like, I can't believe that we had to suffer through Caldera this entire time. But anyways, the Vanguard's weapon integration followed the same sort of route as Black Ops Cold Wars, where there were broken weapons, there was stuff that was really overpowered, and for the very beginning, in fact, it actually was Vanguard Royale only, where you could only use Vanguard weapons. We also saw planes and new vehicles added in, which was interesting to say the least, and we saw a ton of fundamental changes, but the biggest was the loadout change, where you could not buy a loadout before the first loadout event about 5 to 6 minutes into a match. UAVs were also increased in price, but the biggest thing that you would remember out of Season 1 was how incredibly broken and buggy it was at launch. It was broken for a vast number of players for weeks and months, because after the initial drop, unfortunately, all these fixes were delayed because the season launched right before all of the developers went away on holiday for any winter holidays they celebrated, and also New Year's. So there was an extended 3 to 4 week period of time where the very bare bones of the teams were available to work on fixes and live operations. Not the full scale of the operation, but that's what was needed, and unfortunately, it wasn't there. Now, Season 2 of Vanguard was something that they started the season by sort of going on this apology tour, where they were like, hey, listen, we know that we messed up. Season 1 was an absolute mess when it launched, and they even delayed Season 2 as a result. But Season 2 was poised to come back and give players a big update, something that offered a lot in the way of the playable aspect and a lot in the gameplay experience. And honestly, I think for the most part, from here on out in Vanguard's year of support, it did deliver on quite a lot of those things. Now, was it everybody's favorite? Absolutely not, but there were some definitely really good changes made to the game fundamentally and in content that I think are often overlooked and unsung. Again, regardless of how you feel about Caldera, the changes themselves were pretty decent. So for map updates in Caldera, we saw the POIs of factory and underground bunkers. Those bunkers were not specifically located, but they were located with a relative vicinity by a yellow circle on the player's TAC map. You also had high-level loot with the introduction of new items of the Nebula 5 rounds, which replaced stopping power, the PDS, a new gas clearing device, which was a trophy system but for repelling gas, and it's finally actually just made its way back in a couple of days ago with the Season 2 Reloaded update for Warzone Air Quote 3 that we have now. We saw new armored convoys, which was like the train in Verdansk, but these would roam on static routes, but would shoot at players, and if you destroyed it, you could end up getting high-level loot for yourself. We also saw the Nebula 5 bombs, which was an interesting time in the history of Warzone. It was something that kind of had a massive gas effect that would block off specific areas of wherever those were planted, but we also saw in regards to gameplay changes, the new redeploy balloons to easily take and traverse the map. Those were phenomenal additions, and I think one of the best things that came out of the sort of gameplay changes when it came to early Warzone with Caldera. We also saw, as a part of Season 2, not only just Caldera stuff and mainline BR content, but Rebirth Reinforced was something that came along, where this was a rework of Rebirth Island slightly with a newish aesthetic, but also we saw an extension to the map in the southern portion. There was the stronghold area that was added. We also saw new ships added to the northern and southern portions of the map. We saw new bunkers added in, and we saw new weapon trade stations and communication towers added as well. This Rebirth Reinforced event offered up a couple of things that you could earn as a player, but also it introduced the Golden Vault Easter egg, which was our first Easter egg that we saw since Season 1 of Warzone with Black Ops Cold War. So you had over a year of no Easter eggs, but fittingly the next Easter egg back was also on Rebirth, where you could end up getting the Wall Riot Shield blueprint after completing it. Though it was bugged at first, so if you were like me, you didn't actually get it until later on down the line when they were reopened for a Zombies event later in the year. Season 3 introduced a couple of things in regards to Caldera and new crossover events, where Caldera was thematically and in some ways actually functionally changed as well. Caldera had a new skybox. It was much darker and a gloomier version of Caldera. We had a new point of interest called the Dig Site. We had updated locations of the Runway, Peak, and Lagoon. We had a new Gulag area. We had a new Sabotage contract with a new perk of Serpentine, which was incredibly annoying. The underground transit system came back, which was the minecart system we talked about. Again, the third introduction via fast travel within Call of Duty Warzone at that time. And we had one thing that was really cool in regards to lootable items. Not only did you have things like the speed boost, which gave you temporary speed boosts and what you could end up doing in movement speed and sliding, you also had new things like Gulag entry kits and redeploy tokens that would allow you to get another shot at the Gulag or come back immediately. But my personal favorite was lootable perks. You had a certain subset of perks that you could end up getting and putting on top of whatever you had in your loadout. So you didn't have just 3 perks anymore. You instead had 3 and whatever you could end up looting. So essentially you could build yourself up to specialist bonus, which I thought was awesome. Now, one cool thing that did also happen was a crossover event, which was for some people, not for some people, but it was a very whimsical mode, the Godzilla vs. Kong event, Operation Monarch. This was a 2-week event that allowed not only for players to earn items, but the gameplay itself was altered, where you had to fight the Titans, or rather survive while they were around the map. You could control them in some areas, while also you're doing all this and trying to win a battle royale game. So it was an interesting one, but it was kind of fun. It was whimsical, and it was something that didn't take itself too seriously, which was pretty cool. Moving along, Season 4 Vanguard introduced a decent bit. One of the big things was the new Fortune's Keep map, a whole new map and world to explore, a new small map for Resurgence that lived in tandem with Rebirth Island. You saw new features like the new Black Market Run contract, the Cash Extraction public event, and realistically looking back at it, it was an incredibly fun map to play not only, but it was crazy to me that only ended up having a couple of months in the rotation. Of course, we most recently saw it return with Season 2 of Modern Warfare 3 and Warzone, but I mean, before that and before it was confirmed last summer that it would be coming back, it was a crime that this was taken away with such limited time to play it, because it was something that was a lot of fun. Now, along with that, we saw the Mercenaries of Fortune event, which again was an event that we could end up earning, but up until this point, players only had the ability to earn like blueprints as the completion rewards. But what was cool was the Mercenaries of Fortune event offered not only one, but 2 camo rewards you could end up getting just for playing the game and completing challenges associated with the event. So we finally had something that we could put on every single weapon, which was really cool. Now, Caldera also saw some changes in Season 4, where we had new points of interest of Storage Town and the Mercenary Vaults introduced, so it made for bringing back some of those Verdansk classic points of Storage Town and brought them back in Caldera. For some, it was maybe wasted. For others, it was a lot of fun to relive that chaos that ensued there. In Season 4, we also saw the new items of the portable redeploy balloon, so the ability of that redeploy balloon from what we had seen throughout the year, but in a field upgrade fashion and something you could place basically anywhere. We saw the EMP grenade, and we also saw the weapon trade station added to Fortune's Keep and Caldera from Rebirth Island. Season 4 also introduced us to Zombies camos finally, so for anyone that took the time to grind out Zombies camos within Vanguard, well, firstly, one, bless your soul, because that was just ridiculous. Zombies in Vanguard was not good. And two, just like Black Ops Cold War, you finally had it after months of not having the ability to use those mastery camos. The only other things that I thought notable in regards to Season 4 were some really fun stuff in regards to Titanium Trials. Titanium Trials was a variation of Iron Trials, which was a sort of competitive blueprint with higher health and different rule sets and everything like that, as opposed to standard Battle Royale. But Titanium Trials was another set of these themed around the Terminator, where just like the Mercenaries of Fortune event, it offered a universal camo, bringing the total on the season to 5, which was pretty cool. One was a challenge of the Titanium event, another was a completionist reward for the then secret Skynet camo, which was available to those that won 20 matches of Titanium Trials in just 2 weeks that it was around. So to date, I'd still probably say that's one of the rarer camos in COD history, but it was a lot of fun for that one. There was also a smaller event on Rebirth of the Undead, which we didn't have a dedicated Halloween mode or anything like that in Vanguard and the year of support for Warzone, but we did get a Zombies Royale style playlist in Rebirth where if you didn't complete the Golden Vault Easter egg from Season 2, you could actually have just walked in and cleared out the zombies in the vaults. They were already open, you didn't have to do the Easter egg again, but you could end up getting that blueprint for just nothing. It was open by default, but the zombies would attack if you would go in. So anyways, cool little alternative and way to get that blueprint if you missed out on it. Like I said, mine was bugged whenever I did it at the first day or so of that when it was introduced back in Season 2. So it was nice to actually get that even though I didn't earlier. And Season 5 of Vanguard was the final season of Vanguard's year of support. Every other game in the sort of modern era here has had 6 seasons, but Vanguard did. Season 5 was essentially the beginning of the end, though, because the content itself wasn't as heavy in regards to Season 5's offering, but Raven also publicly was shifting their support to the upcoming Warzone 2.0. We knew that we'd be seeing the end of Caldera, Fortune's Keep, and Rebirth at the time, so really, we just kind of saw the whole host of things that looked to have fun with the final season of Warzone 1. Caldera, we saw different points of interest changes where Peak had turned into an active volcano and added much more build up to the POI, and specifically the underbelly, the sort of underground areas. This was the Task Force Tyrants headquarters at that point. The classic Gulag from Verdansk was returned to Caldera. The Doomsday Station was added, which would give a ton of valuable items to those that took the cash to do it and then defended it against the AI and potential other players who would attack, rewarding players with things like specialist bonus, 1 per player, streaks like Foresight, and I think it could get an advanced UAV and some other items along the way. We saw playlist rotations of the classic Iron Trials, Champions of Caldera, and Operation Last Call, but that was the last of our Warzone 1 experience. At a time when players weren't fond of Caldera, when they wanted Vanguard's year to be over, players then looked to what was next, because, I mean, surely with 3 years of everything under their belt, they're gonna get it right in the next iteration, right? And that's where, after sort of COD Next and into the Season 1 launch of Warzone 2.0, for better or for worse, it was a drastically different game in feel. It was a much slower pace. There were changes to the fundamentals and the looting, which required a backpack system with varied sizes, the ability to use the inventory space however you felt fit. You could carry like 30 armor plates if you had a large backpack, or you could carry none. You could carry 5 or more self-revives, you could carry none. You could carry multiple stacks of 210 rifle ammo, or you could carry none. You also had a plenty of number of fundamental changes, because loadouts were no longer a thing, like at all. They weren't even just like in Caldera, where they weren't a thing for the first couple of minutes of a game. They just weren't a thing at all. You had to buy specific weapons instead of loadouts, and you also didn't have any perks. Streaks were also limited per buy station, something that stuck around for quite some time, and buy stations changed so that not every single item was in every single buy stations. Vehicles also had a limited amount of fuel. At the very beginning of the game, you could not actually sprint and plate, which was something that was kind of crazy to consider, and a whole host of other gameplay changes where this was truly, it was Warzone a name, but it didn't feel like the Warzone that everybody had played the last 2.5 to 3 years at that point. And it was something that, well, it was pretty polarizing to say the least. Although one cool thing that did come along with the Warzone 2.0 experience was that of the Champions Quest, a way to actually nuke Al Mazrah and win a Warzone match by setting off a nuke, winning 5 games of Warzone in a row, and then having to complete the Champions Quest contract, which was to assemble that nuke by first finding all the items and then assembling it and defending it while it counted down. If you did this, you not only, of course, win the game, but you get some cool loot that would continue to change out and be new each season. So, cool feature, though, that was pretty nice out of the introduction here. Now, Season 2 was the sort of start of where we started to see things revert backwards. The next sort of year in content would be a lot of trying to add new stuff, but also slowly reverting back to the Warzone that we were at before the introduction of COD 2.0. It's rumored that in an effort to try and save face in regards to the dropping player population, that the map Ashika Island was something that was pushed up in the intended content schedule, where in Season 2 we did get Ashika Island. We saw the return of Resurgence, and it was no longer just the big map of Al Mazrah to play Battle Royale on. You had a new map and world to explore, faster pace and everything like that, but still didn't quite scratch the itch because a lot of the gameplay fundamentals were way different. For Ashika Island, we also saw things like the new search and seizure contract, the new public event of the data heist, the redeploy drone was back, but only for Ashika Island at the time, and the Sea Treasures machine and token offered up some things that was just smaller scale loot, but a fun little interactable piece with the map that you could end up playing around with. Now also, Al Mazrah and the big map experience also saw some changes as well, where new points of interest were added in. There was a downed plane in the Satik Cave complex, and an underground cave network was added in between Rohan Oil and Tarak Village, as well as a passenger train was added that went around the map as well. Again, being that train system we had seen by comparison to like Verdansk. We saw 2 new kill streaks of the counter UAV and supply box UAV added in. We saw the returning equipment of the redeploy packs and the return of the Gulag 1v1. Yeah, that sounds weird, right? But it's true, because if you didn't play Season 1 and the launch of Warzone 2.0, well, the Gulag was actually a 2v2 Gulag. So nothing said, hey, I'm trying to win this game like helping your enemy out of the Gulag as well. Oftentimes it just didn't work out either. You'd be left in a 1v2 situation. Sometimes it was bugged where you wouldn't even get a teammate. And it was just something that it wasn't an overall great experience, but 1v1 returned with that same launch Gulag that we had. Now, Season 3 of Modern Warfare 2, this is again where they started to continuously try and ramp things back up, get people more excited into what happened. We saw finally a new Gulag in Al Mazrah where the Black Site was introduced, which wasn't a fan of that one in particular, personally speaking, but it was also something that they said they'd have a new Gulag at some point, which, spoiler alert, never came. We never got another Gulag past Season 3, which is kind of crazy. The redeploy drones from Ashika Island did finally make its way over into Al Mazrah, which definitely was nice in helping the pace of play and helping to traverse the world a little bit. There was a new point of interest in Ashika Island of the cargo ship and several submarines outside of Port Ashika. There were new utilities of the tempered plate carrier, UAV towers, perk packages, deployable buy stations, the Gulag entry kit, and more. But honestly, in Season 3, the big thing that came out of this was Season 3 Reloaded. We had, for the first time in Warzone's history, a ranked mode, something that prioritized a sort of skill subset here with it and going for SR gains. Now, honestly, I actually liked the way that Warzone handled the SR system and the ranked system as a whole, because while Warzone is inherently just a random game mode, Call of Duty and Warzone added a bit of individuality where you can control some of those variables by having things like loadouts, but inherently it's still a lot of random nature, right? But with this, you ended up having deployment fees where you had to pay X amount of SR to play a game, and then every assist, kill, and placement you moved up in, you'd end up getting SR gained back. So initially you'd start negative, but you'd work your way back to even and eventually positive with your goal of climbing the ranks in that SR ladder. This was a tremendous amount of fun, and for somebody that honestly did not like Warzone at all through Warzone 2.0, this actually gave me a reason to come back, and I grinded it out in, I think it was Season 5. But anyways, Season 4, we saw sort of Warzone finally sort of catching its stride here a little bit within this Warzone 2.0 era. Obviously, it still was not where a lot of players, myself included, thought it should be, but we started to get things that were finally giving content to players rather than focusing on reverting stuff. In Season 4, we ended up seeing the new map of Vanguard, which was interesting because we had just 2 seasons earlier gotten our first Resurgence map, and we already had our second within Warzone 2.0. We saw a bunch of things like dynamic fog, which wasn't a fan of. I kind of thought that was a gimmick, and it was since toned down a lot since where it was at the launch of the game. But we also saw, in regards to Resurgence, a massively cool feature that was well overdue, I thought. The dynamic Resurgence timer. That was something that you could play solo quads and not be punished, because it would take into account the solo rule sets. It would recognize you're a solo and treat it as if you were playing a solo game mode, but instead with the players of 4. So you had the ability to come back on a Resurgence timer, whereas if you previously had played solo quads, if you died, you were out. And same thing goes with duos, trios, and quads. Whatever you had, that timer was altered in coming back based off the player count of your party, which was pretty cool. We saw new utility items like a favorite supply box, which gave you your loadout weapons of your dubbed favorite class. We saw the reinforcement flare, and we saw the portable redeploy drone come along, and also Temp V was a gimmicky thing that was a part of the boys collaboration, but anyways, that was added. We saw the new plate carriers of the medic plate carrier, comms plate carrier, and stealth plate carrier all coming from DMZ at that point, which was pretty cool. For Season 5 of Modern Warfare 2, we saw the Champions Quest come to Vandal. Vandal ended up having its own version of Standard Battle Royale, which is pretty cool, in addition to that Resurgence mode, so you had sort of double dipping in regards to the experience with one singular map, but that Champions Quest was finally available, where, as we mentioned, this was something that allowed for players to win 5 games, go for that nuke contract, assemble the nuke, watch it count down and defend it, and then finally win the game by detonating it. So it was cool. It came along with its own set of rewards, and actually, speaking of Champions Quest, I think it was Season 5 that we saw our first camo introduced, of the radioactivity camo in regards to the Al Mazrah Champions Quest nuke. But we saw those new features of the favorite supply box, reinforcement flare, and portable redeploy drone come over to Al Mazrah as well as Ashika Island, which was honestly, the reinforcement flare was huge for the Warzone ranked experience, because that was something that allowed for a lot more SR gains because players were coming back more often than not. And honestly, it offset a lot of the changes because, if I'm not mistaken, Season 5 was also the first season where Warzone ranked was only 100 players as opposed to 150. But we also saw new things like the Signals Intelligence contract come to, all of these new features, the public event of the occupation scan and high stakes, and in the point of interest of Al Mazrah, Zaya Observatory was destroyed because we ended up seeing our Modern Warfare 3 reveal event happen in Season 5 as well, where you ended up collecting gas canisters and exfilling, but as you did, you were betrayed by Coney Group, and then it went right into the Modern Warfare 3 reveal event. So we saw the return of the reveal in Warzone, where we didn't have it in Vanguard going into Modern Warfare 2, and it was this return of the live event overall. Season 6 of Modern Warfare 2, that was the next and final piece here of the Warzone 2.0 experience, where at the time, players ended up experiencing a first look at what Warzone, air quote, 3.0 would be, even though it's just called Warzone still. But this was something that was going to change everything in regards to the movement mechanics and fundamentals that was seen first at COD Next. So it was the last time you'd have to really put up with a lot of those movement mechanics and stuff that people weren't really too fond of with Modern Warfare 2. But Season 6 did also bring along with it at least one cool part that I thought was the Halloween-themed Al Mazrah and Vandal with the Haunting event. The return of the Haunting event, where we didn't again have one in Vanguard's year of support, but it was pretty cool. We saw some cool crossover events. We saw some really cool stuff you could do in matches as well, and it was up there as a really cool event, though full transparency, I didn't play a whole ton because I didn't care. Again, I was one of those people that's like, I can't wait to move on to the next thing, and so I didn't really take part in it all that much. But anyways, that ended Modern Warfare 2's year of support, and now finally into Modern Warfare 3 and where we are today. Season 1 of Modern Warfare 3 changed up a lot of stuff. Not only did we change out of Al Mazrah and move over into Urzikstan, but we saw our first integration of the next generation of the Warzone experience. All 37 Modern Warfare 3 base weapons in Warzone, including blueprint variants, all operators came into the game, and my favorite thing was that all camos also transferred, but also were usable across weapons regardless of the game for the first time in Warzone. Obviously, that was partly due to the fact that there was carry forward content from Modern Warfare 2 into Modern Warfare 3, but honestly, man, like the ability to use any camo you wanted the first day you could play Warzone on any weapon, save for those mastery camos that were exclusive still to Modern Warfare 2 and Modern Warfare 3 guns, but anything. You could use Ghoulie on your new Modern Warfare 3 weapons, you could end up using your new Zombies mastery camos, your Borealis and Interstellar. You would use that on Modern Warfare 3 weapons where that wasn't restricted like it was in years past by a couple of months. That stuff was so cool to me. And honestly, again, that ability to use that, say, iridescent camo that I got from Season 5 iridescent Warzone ranked, I could use that on any weapon I wanted as well. If there's one thing that I want to continue on into the next chapter of Warzone here this time next year, and after another integration of another game into Warzone, it's that. I want to be able to use all of my camos that I've earned the last year and a half on weapons going into the future. That gives them so much more value in my books, and I love the fact that that was something that was introduced with Warzone this year. But on top of that, we also saw new perks of Shrouded, Flex, Resolute, Stalker, Payout, Escapist, Prime, Irradiated, Shrapnel, Mountaineer, Mechanic, Combat Scout, and Tempered, and there was some cool stuff fundamentally speaking as well with perks. Overkill is now no longer needed as a perk to take 2 primaries. It was simply a default item, which was awesome. You have the new Urzikstan Gulag, which was not quite the Gulag Showers, the OG one, but it was modeled after that. You had the returning contract of the big game bounty. You had the new public event flyby. You had new Gulag public events where there was locked and loaded, where your weapons were fully kitted out. Go again, where if you died, you had another chance and you had a second round of the Gulag. Cash drop, where it was something that there was just tons of cash littered around the world. So if you came back and you were victorious, you came out usually with a lot of cash. And then night vision, where you'd eventually have an NVG version of the Gulag, which actually, thinking about it, I still have never gotten one, which is kind of crazy. We saw new equipment of the Breacher Drone, Thermobaric Grenade, EMD Grenade, and Scatter Mines coming in. We saw the new kill streaks of the Guardian and Mosquito Drone, and we had some new changes to the Champion's Quest for Urzikstan, which also gave a new detonation animation, which is pretty cool. But Season 1 offered a whole lot in regards to the base experience, changing a lot of what Warzone 2 enacted with Season 1 and beyond. Again, the entirety of like Modern Warfare 2's year of support was kind of like, hey, let's reverse what those changes were made, and Modern Warfare 3 set to kind of clean a slate of that, where most of Modern Warfare 3 was marketed as, hey, you know what, Infinity Ward, we're doing the opposite of that. It's kind of the same thing with Warzone in Modern Warfare 3 as well. And finally, to where we are to date, Season 2. We saw the return and altered map of Fortune's Keep, where those fissures that we had in Verdansk 84 kind of come back in the way of Fortune's Keep. A slightly destroyed Fortune's Keep, slightly altered in regards to aesthetic. We also saw things that for the initial launch of it, we saw zombies crossovers, where we had the eradication contract, weekly zombies targets, wonder weapons, the rogue signal contract, and zombies power-ups. We also saw the new squad wipe streak, which is, to me, still kind of a useless thing, but it shows you how many squads you've knocked out of the game in a short period of time. You have the bunker buster streak, which was just added. Same with the research vessel added. Warzone ranked play resurgence was added. We still don't have regular big map BR ranked play on Urzikstan just yet. I'd imagine that comes next season in a couple of weeks' time at this point, but we saw that introduced, which offered that sort of same basis, but in resurgence instead of the big map experience. So drastically different, and for those that want to play a bit more high action, high intensity gameplay, but it's for some people, not for others. And in regards to Urzikstan, well, not much has changed as opposed to Season 1. Kind of like what we saw with the launch of Verdansk, where we just had that massive update to the game where we got a brand new experience, a brand new world to explore. So not a whole ton changed with Season 2 in regards to Urzikstan. There was a bunker that did open up underneath Old Town, but that's about it. But Season 3, I'm expecting a bit more to happen in regards to what's upcoming. But that is the 4-year history of where we are with Warzone and everything that's happened since day one and even beforehand. So that said, that was a look down memory lane and what we've had for Warzone over these past 4 years. Kind of crazy to think that it's been that long already, but also, I mean, like when I think back of it, it doesn't seem like it's been that long, but we've also done a lot recounting everything here. I mean, this video is going to be 45 minutes-ish just talking about the seasons. So where Warzone goes in the future, how long of a future it has, who knows? Activision has invested a ton into this, so I expect at least through the next Modern Warfare game that we see everything involved in one. But honestly, at this point, I don't see them getting rid of Warzone. I think this is as much a staple as anything else for Call of Duty now at this point, for better or for worse. But that is what we're going to call it. That is the entire evolution and history of Warzone to date. So let me know your thoughts down below. Again, do me the biggest favor. If you guys made it this far, if you guys enjoyed this video at all, do me a favor and drop a like on it. And if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss a single thing regarding all things Modern Warfare 3, other FPS content. We got you covered on the channel. But for now, that's what we're going to call it. I'll see you later. Take care. Here's to 4 years and peace.